In the movie No Country for Old Men, there's a scene where a bounty hunter named Carson Wells, played by Woody Harrelson, meets his fate at the hands of Anton Chigurh, a hired killer gone rogue, played by Javier Bardem. In the sequence, just before Anton shoots Carson, he asks him, "If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?" Presumably, the rules by which Carson operates are dedicated to maximizing the odds of success and minimizing the odds of failure. There's no guarantee that the choice with the highest expected return will yield the best outcome on every trial, even though it's always the best choice going in. There's always the chance of a lower probability outcome carrying the day. While there are optimal choices, in a business like Carson's, there is no rule that wins every time. So Anton must be mocking the expectation that a rule would be of use. Anton presumes that Carson operates by a certain rule and has faith in it. Assuming that is the case, the rule worked up to the point when it did not. The fact is that there are no guarantees in life. It is highly unlikely that things will always go our way. A good outcome will vindicate a strategy in the eyes of its beneficiary, but given that there are always probabilities involved, it will fail some of the time. Similarly, in the gas station scene in No Country for Old Men, where Anton puts the owner to what appears to be a life and death wager on a coin flip, he tells his would-be victim that he has been putting it up all his life without knowing it, meaning wagering everything. The coin toss vindicates the owner, allowing him to live another day. The rule that brought him to that intersection could not be assailed by Anton, and thus he congratulated him and advised him to keep the lucky coin apart from the others lest it become just another coin. Regardless of the fact that there is no success guaranteed on our path, but even if we do succeed, there's no escaping death. There's only the consolation of a life well lived. But even up to that point, we can't declare a man happy until he's dead, as Solon of Athens is reputed to have told King Croesus of Lydia. There's no rule that guarantees a good end for anything impermanent, which is everything that appears in the awareness we are. A tidy circumstance at the end of our demise is the most the world can offer, assuming it's our first time dying. But for the one who dies before they die, the circumstances at the physical end have no bearing on whether he can be counted happy. Let me say that again. For the one who dies before they die, the circumstances at the physical end have no bearing on whether he or she can be counted happy. The happiness is known after the first death, and it vindicates all that went before it, dispelling regret and rendering irrelevant to happiness the circumstances from that point forth. In that, happiness is no longer believed to be the product of circumstances' alignment with the mind's ideal. Different people can have the same circumstance, but be miles apart in terms of happiness, based on their beliefs and expectations. At the extreme of this continuum would be Sahaja Samadhi, where a being is in an exalted state that one could expect with prolonged meditation, but they're not in those circumstances. They're out and about doing their thing, working, chopping wood, and yet they're in this meditative state. So regardless of the circumstances, they're in a higher state of bliss than a person who has the most ideal of things going on. So within the paradigm of body identification, happiness appears in the moment when desired expectations align with reality. Two people with the same propensity for happiness can have different feelings about a circumstance based on just expectation. But expectations aside, some people are just more happy per unit of good fortune than others, and that has something to do with dying before you die. The more things with which there is identification, the more conditions must be satisfied for these things in order for there to be a feeling of safety. And safety comes before love and self-actualization on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But that feeling of safety is based on a belief. So in Sahaja Samadhi, there is the continuation of all of the things that would be precluded by a deep sitting in meditation. But it's possible to be in this state despite all types of other activities. What's missing is a certain belief, a certain unconscious belief. All the conscious beliefs are still there, or at least can be used, all the information. But there's an unconscious belief that is what is the source of this differential inability to appreciate a circumstance. It's the strong belief in being one to win and lose, and that's a function of being identified with something. How you regard what appears in awareness has bearing on your state of being, both moment to moment and long term, as a consequence of having fewer triggering events from interactions between thoughts, the amygdala, and the endocrine system. If there's no automatic sense that one is the body or a conceptual subject of thoughts, there's a foregoing of stress damage and repurposing of resources that were formerly dedicated to repairing its ravages. The change is palpable. How phenomena is regarded hinges on the question of who you are. How we feel about things depends on who we are to relate to them. Every being who is identified with form and conceptual self has a bingo card of events that, if witnessed, will generate a stress response of some kind. Each person's bingo card is different depending on their conditioning, as well as the provenance of their form. So someone who, for lack of there being a reproducible solution to the hard problem of consciousness, cannot regard themselves as other than a self-aware biochemical meat robot carrying some memories in a brain, will continue to be subject to the inner weather created by outer circumstance, both current and as remembered. It is and always has been the predominant state of being to be in body identification and in reaction to these things. But a departure from this paradigm of identity is possible in an individual, and it has happened throughout history. It's not mere disassociation or dissociation, but rather an ongoing peace that was of an unknown or unrecalled sort before its appearance. The death of identification with form is not one's loss of the human owner's manual. Its ubiquity would not herald the dawn of an Advaita zombie apocalypse. The term for this condition of abiding peace, which I have said before, is Sahaja Samadhi. It's a walking samadhi. It does not impair motor or executive functioning, but it does change motivation. A person who walks in peace by virtue of having no automatic identification with what appears in awareness doesn't feel a party to the playing out of mental scenarios in which they are a character. There's no sense of being the one to whom glory or shame can accrue. And the state in which they walk eclipses the daydream of an ideal future and dispels a second guessing of the past, no matter how turbulent it was. While history has given us no hope of a departure from the reality that in the aggregate people don't change, it is at least by virtue of anecdotes, should you choose to believe them, possible for an individual to change in a way that, if it were made ubiquitous, would turn the human race into a more peaceful, intelligent species. Presumably for any individual, this state would only ever be the result of some transformative process, and thus it would not be expected to exist apart from the ideal conditions that gave rise to it. Relative to the proposition that in the aggregate people don't change, there is only one thing that does, and that is technology. The question is then whether technology can facilitate a mass rearranging of people's inner states in a way that's inverse to the accumulation that has progressed in the information age. A shift in consciousness away from body-mind identification has not occurred, but were it to happen, it would be the result of something novel, something we've not seen before, like the invention of or exposure to a technology, such as this one on which you're hearing about this other state of being. We are most certainly using technology to condition people in a certain way. Who's to say that with the right hands in charge of the content distribution, people might not see the value of cultivating emotional intelligence through mindfulness? If it's possible for some now due to exposure at the right time in the right condition, it could be possible for more. And then perhaps with a critical mass, the vibrational level of the species could be raised to where the aliens who are supposedly viewing us wouldn't see us as the Klingons of the universe. While some beings who have been deemed saints are 100% pacifist, it doesn't mean that all such beings are unwilling to pick up the gauntlet in the face of a call to action. With an awakening to the non-self nature of what arose from the causal chain, there is an allowing of life to unfold according to its purpose. And thus, a wood chopper keeps chopping wood, and a prince, such as Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, goes forth into battle as his fate, as he was advised by Krishna. Ramana Maharshi characterized aspirants as being like different pieces of wood, requiring more or less time and heat to catch fire depending on their dampness. Different people have different hindrances, such as wrong view. The proving out of the hard problem of consciousness is not required to see the end of the suffering and aggression that comes from unconscious identification with what appears in the awareness one is. When you know what you are not by virtue of its appearance within what sees it, you know that nobody else is these things either. And assuming you don't take the solipsistic view, there is a realization of both the non-self nature of these things for oneself and all beings.